Okay, good morning. My name is Don Miller, and I'll be the moderator for this particular workshop. This workshop is the Alternative Contracting Method Design Build Process Opportunities and Risks. Welcome to this workshop. Just a couple of ground rules before we get started. We appreciate it if you keep your mics muted, and we also appreciate if you keep your cameras off. Save the bandwidth. We will be turning on our cameras as we speak, so I'll turn mine off once I introduce some folks here today. And so with that, I just wanted to start with introductions of our panel today. We have, I'm the moderator for the panel. My name is Don Miller, and I work for Oneida Engineering Solutions for about the last 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for DOT in many capacities, including the construction area and the contracting area, which when I was working in that area, I spent a lot of time talking about design build and what the DOT potentially could do with design build. Unfortunately, in my era when I was there, up to about 6-7 years ago, design build wasn't a process that was allowed by law. However, since then, as many of you know, the program has began in Wisconsin, and we've got some speakers today that can help us out with a lot of different things relating to that program. Pleased to introduce our WisDOT presenter here, Ben Thompson. Ben is WisDOT's alternative contracting engineer, has been in the position since 2020. Before that, he worked in the project development section at WisDOT's Southwest region. Ben completed his master's degree in construction engineering and management with a focus on alternative contracting from UW-Madison, and then worked for a while with a bridge design engineer at a local consulting firm before coming over to WisDOT. So it's a gentleman who runs the WisDOT program that has a lot of information and knowledge about alternative contracting methods. Also with us today, and I'm glad to say, the Design Build Institute of America has provided us with a couple of speakers. First, I'm going to introduce our contractor presenter, David Pupkowitz. He's a senior director, business development for heavy civil group with Archer Western Construction and a senior member of the DBIA's National Transportation Committee. Dave works again for Archer Western, which is Archer Western is a part of the Walsh Group, which includes Walsh Construction, a company which many of us in the Midwest are familiar with. Mr. Pupkowitz has over 30 years of design build transportation experience, spanning numerous market sectors, including highways, bridges, airports, and transit and rail. His role involves opportunity tracking, DB team creation, DB, design build team creation, contract negotiation, and pursuit management. Throughout his career, he has helped develop and improve the design build delivery process for several southeastern state DOTs. For his contributions, he has been recognized with fellow status as a Design Build Institute of America's designated design build professional. So again, this is a gentleman who worked in the industry, and also has helped a lot of other folks with this process throughout the country. Also today, we have our consultant design presenter, Jim Avdabile, PE DBIA. He's the vice president for transportation infrastructure with RS&H and chair of the DBIA National Transportation Aviation Committee. Jim is a strategic infrastructure business development leader at RS&H Consultants. He received his BSCA and MSCE from Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, and is a registered professional engineer in Florida, Massachusetts, Maine, and Georgia. Jim spent 4 years overseeing RS&H's design build practice and has served in active leadership roles at the Design Build Institute of America at both the local and national levels since 2009. So a lot of design build understanding and experience. Jim has led RS&H initiatives in alternative project delivery, including design build, public-private partnerships, and managed lane projects. He is a certified Design Build Institute of America professional. So therefore, as you've heard, we've got a great group of experienced professionals for your panel today on the design build alternative project delivery method. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about what the focus of this workshop is. As WisDOT continues to roll out its design build program, it's important that contractors and consultants understand a few things. One of them obviously is the mechanics of the design build alternative contracting approach. Also, people need to understand how are design build teams put together. They also want to know what prime contractors and lead designers are looking for in members for their team. This is especially important for some of the DBEs at the conference. How can they become involved? Again, what opportunities, number 4 there, that this contracting method provides them. Also, the different kinds of risks that are involved with this contract delivery method. As we know, different kinds of contracts have different kinds of risk involved. Our panel will help us with identifying some of those risks. So, as I mentioned, these items are the general focus of this workshop. Our panel is here to help us talk a little bit about each one of them. First of all, we're going to have Ben talk a little bit about, Ben Thompson from WisDOT talk a little bit about more kind of a design build 101. How does design build contracting work? He's going to summarize the WisDOT DB program from its inception to the current time period. He's going to discuss WisDOT's current program and what it might be like in the future. And he's going to discuss some of the opportunities and requirements that this design build provides for DBEs, as well as others on the contract. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben, and I'll be moving the slides for him as he speaks. Ben?
Sounds good. Thanks, Don. So like Don said, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm the alternative contracting engineer at WisDOT. I'm just going to give a quick background on the program at in Wisconsin, a little bit on the development project that we've been working on and the process that we go through for a design build project, and then also talk a little bit about the state of the program and what our next steps are, kind of like Don mentioned, and then I'll let you get to the actual experts because I'm still learning a lot too. So design build just basically is an agreement that allows us to sign one contract for design and construction of a project. In 2019, the state legislature created a law, a statute that said we shall administer a program for design build projects. It requires a 2-step process for selection, which is a request for qualifications and a request for proposals. Those are our 2 steps. And in 2021, legislation updated that program to a pilot program, put a $250 million cap on the program, and required us to do 6 projects, 1 of each type of design build, which I'll discuss on the next slide, and then 3 that we have latitude to decide as far as what kind of a project they'll be. We can go to the next slide, and this gives the 3 types of design build procurement that are allowed under Wisconsin law right now, and they really differ basically in how the successful proposer is identified. So with a best value project, that's the kind of the thing I think most people think about when they think about design build, where you have a proposal that has a technical score and a cost score, and you combine the 2 scores, and the winning proposal has the best combination. There's also a low bid method of procurement with design build, where the winning proposal really includes a technical proposal that's responsive, so it meets all the requirements, but those aren't necessarily scored. The project is awarded based on the price, so the lowest price would take that contract. And what we mean by responsive technical proposal is one that either meets or exceeds our RFP requirements, but like I said, that wouldn't be scored under that method. And then finally, we have fixed price variable scope, where the winning proposal has the lowest price and the best qualitative scope of work, with a price that can't exceed a fixed price that's set and would be set in the RFP. So those are the 3 types that we can use, and we are required, like I said in the last slide, to use 1 of each, and then the last 3 projects would be at our discretion based on what kind of projects we have to use design build on. This is kind of the 101 Don mentioned, the beginning of it. This is a slide that kind of illustrates the differences between a design bid build project that we would do in a normal situation and a design build project. You can see the big difference kind of comes towards the end there, where design and construction start to overlap a little bit in design build, and then they tend to get compressed a little bit. So there's a couple of differences. One is you can see the duration. If you think of the duration as the horizontal axis there, the duration from planning to construction can be shorter, with DesignBuild, and you can also see with that little red triangle there on each one, WisDOT has a cost established earlier with DesignBuild, whereas with the Design Bid Build, it comes after we bid it, after it's designed, right before construction. And with DesignBuild, it tends to come earlier, before final design starts. We can go to the next one then, Don. This is a comparison between the traditional design bid build method and the design build method in terms of the contract structure. It's kind of a simplistic view, but basically you can kind of see there's two branches on the design bid build side. The traditional side, where there's a contract with a designer and a general contractor, and then obviously the subcontracts that go underneath that. And with the design build, we have just the single contract between the owner and the design builder. And then the relationships beneath that are the design builder working with subconsultants and specialties and design. So that's kind of the difference as to how the structure is set up. And we could go to the next one, please, Don. Thanks. Benefits and challenges that the department has been seeing. The things that we look for in a design build project, the reason we want to do it would be things like an expedited schedule, that earlier cost certainty. We also get an earlier schedule certainty because we'll get a schedule at the beginning of design and we'll know kind of what the design builder's plans are. Earlier contractor input hopefully would lead to enhanced constructability, and kind of related to that, we have built-in opportunities to value engineer, even if we don't use that necessarily, specific technical term. We can still do value engineering more informally, I guess, through the design build process. And then the big one that we often talk about is innovation. So a chance for the design builders to kind of show what they know and do things the way that they think is going to work the best for us. And hopefully we'll find some new things that work better than things we've done in the past. Then we also have the challenges. Some of these might be a little obvious, but first one is that the WisDOT has less control over the final product. So we're used to specifying everything, down to kind of a tight tolerance. And that's not always the case with design build. There's a lot more freedom in terms of what the design builder has the latitude to do in a project with design and construction. I mean, we still have to meet our requirements and our core specifications, but there's a lot more control in the hands of the design builder than in a general traditional project. And then there's also preliminary design efforts. And going through our first few projects, we found this to be a big challenge, especially with kind of jump-starting our program, is that we need to get things moved up in the schedule with real estate, utilities, environmental stuff, permits. That stuff has to all happen earlier in the process and be more detailed than we're used to kind of at that point in the process. And then there's also proposal development efforts for the industry. It's a lot more work to put together a design build RF proposal than it is to put together a low bid, a type of bid. There's also process development efforts that WisDOT's been going through, and we've been learning a lot about that through the last couple of years, and a learning curve for WisDOT and also for industry to get used to a new method and a new system in Wisconsin that people haven't necessarily used before. So this just talks a little bit about what we've been doing at WisDOT to develop our program, our design build program. We are contracting with a consultant to assist us with developing the program. They've helped us with creating template documents for the procurement. They're helping us develop internal manuals to document our procedures and requirements so that our region personnel will have the tools they need to kind of help them through one of these projects. They're working on a system for tracking and taking in design build project submittals for our first few projects. And we're also working with them to create a methodology that will help us select the best future projects for design build. They've also been helping us with some stakeholder outreach. And then we also have a research project going on with UW-Milwaukee right now, where they're going to look at some of our processes and do a review of what we're doing with our first few projects, and also compare us to some peer states, look at our lessons learned, and then also help us with that project selection criteria. So this is the process of how a design build project is going to work at WisDOT. First off, WisDOT or a design consultant, if that's the way the project is staffed, will develop preliminary plans. So we'll we'll complete an environmental document. We'll design approximately to 30%, so we'll have about 30% plans. We'd like to have real estate obtained by the time we get the RFP out, and we'd like to have the utility coordination underway and as far along as possible when the RFP goes out. And then once this preliminary design step is finished, we go to that two-step procurement process I mentioned on the first slide. That's legislated in the statute, with a request for qualifications and a request for proposal step. And the request for qualifications is phase one. So basically we put out a request for qualifications, and it includes things like the project goals, the scope of the work that's going to be done in the project, the project schedule, and then the requirements for what we would see as qualifications for that, to do that job, and then some criteria for evaluating the qualifications of the people that respond, or the teams that respond. And this kind of gives us the assurance that we'll have a qualified pool of proposers to draw from in phase two. We can go to the next one, Don. So this just shows a little bit of the evaluation criteria that we have for the RFQ. It'll vary from project to project, but the basic sort of things that we would look at every time are organization and experience, so how the team is put together, the experience of the submitter or the design builder, some of the personnel on the project and what their experience is, project management approach, how they're planning to integrate design and construction, and the experience of all the project participants, so everybody on the team, and what some of the past projects that they've done, examples of schedule and cost control that they've been involved with, and then a system for accountability, which is basically their approach to quality and also environmental commitments. We can go to the next one. I think that's phase two. So that's once we're through that phase one with the statements of qualifications, there'll be a short list of essentially pre-qualified teams that will be allowed to submit a proposal under phase two here, which this is the part of the process that gives WisDOT the chance to choose the project team with the most beneficial beneficial proposal. And the RFP includes things like final design requirements, so the technical requirements that have to be met, the requirements and the criteria that people use to develop their proposals, the schedule that we'll use for procurement, so going from the SOQ to project award. There's a process for something called alternative technical concepts, which is where a design builder would propose something that's not in our RFP. That's if someone has an idea that is different than what we had initially thought we would do on this project, or different than what's in the requirements. They can propose those concepts at this point. There's also information on a stipend, which is usually paid to an unsuccessful firm at the RFP stage. So anyone who got shortlisted but is not awarded the project would generally be eligible for a stipend. And then the stipend would cover basically the intellectual property that the proposer puts forward. So WisDOT would be able to use those ideas from their proposal, even if they're not even if they're not awarded the project. Contract terms and conditions are in that document, more or less like the standard spec, section 100, that kind of stuff. Technical requirements, applicable standards that need to be followed, and then reference information documents generally refers to things like the 30% design and the environmental document and survey data and things like that WisDOT has gathered to put together for the preliminary design. And then finally, the content and the delivery instructions. So yeah, we can go to the next one. So this is where we are at right now in terms of this new program at WisDOT. We have our template documents drafted. We have our first two RFQs posted. We've received the SOQs for both of those, and we did distribute our first RFP. The UWM external process review is underway for this coming year. And we can go to the next one, I think. This slide is a little bit of how we look at projects that we want to select for design build. Especially for these first few projects, we want to limit project risks, especially the risks that will be unknown at the time of an RFP. So we want to have a well-defined scope. We want to limit environmental risks if possible, limit right-of-way requirements, and limit utility risks, at least in these first few projects. We look for opportunities for innovation or protected benefits projected benefits from earlier contractor input. And then we looked, especially here at the beginning, for projects early in the design process. We need to balance projects that are far enough along that we can get a good scope and a good request for proposals, but we don't want to take away the innovation piece that comes by, if we chose a project too far along in the design process where we'd already designed all the innovation potential out. And then we also have an alternative contracting evaluation tool that FHWA has put together that we run our projects through to get a sense of the appropriateness of the project for one of these alternative contracting methods. This slide shows the first 3 design build projects. We'll talk a little bit more about them on the next slide in detail, but there's one in the North Central region, one in the Northeast near Appleton, or in Appleton, and one in the Southwest at the Lone Rock Bridge. And so here's the first 3 projects. That first one is the North Central region, County Highway, or US 45 from County C to Galno Road. This was an asphalt pavement replacement. This was our low bid design build, but it was canceled. We didn't have a responsive proposer or for the SOQ phase. The second one was State Highway 130, and that's the one we're currently in the process of working through. We're at the RFP stage now. This is a design build best value project, and this is a bridge replacement project. The third one is the Northeast region project, the State Highway 125. It's also a bridge replacement. This is going to be a best value design build, and that one, the RFQ is coming out in about a few days. So the next steps on the design build process, 130, the Lone Rock project, the proposals are coming in May. 125, the RFQ is anticipated to go out, like I said, in this week yet, and then the RFP would be around May. So this phase 2 of that project. And then the UW Milwaukee report is anticipated towards the end of the year, so we can look at our effectiveness and our project selection criteria. And then in the interim between now and the end of the year, we have 3 more projects to be determined, and we're looking at where those will be. So if you're looking for more information, one place to go is our website. On the website, there is a link for firms that are interested in working on design build projects. It's just a list. It's not curated in any way or anything like that. It's just a list of people who've expressed interest, or firms who've expressed interest in being included on a design build team. So if you're looking to get involved, this might be a first place to start, a first spot to look. If you'd like to get onto that list, you can just send me an email. There's a link down at the bottom there for my email of the web page. And this is just under the doing business section of the WisDOT website with the design build link. And then there's information for industry there, you see, is where you go to get that. Then one last slide with more information. We will have the design build teams for the Lone Rock project. Well, they will be attending the networking session tomorrow. So if you're looking for more information on some design build stuff, that would be a place to go. We also have our website, like I mentioned, wisconsindot.gov design build, and then my email's down there at the bottom. So I appreciate the chance to talk to everybody, and I'll turn it over to the design build experts. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ben. Before I get going with that, I'm just gonna real quickly here check to see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions. I don't see anything in the chat as far as questions. Okay, so if you do happen to have questions along the way, we can have you put them in the chat, or there's a Q&A portion that you can put them in as well. We can answer them as we go, or we can answer them at the end, either way. So feel free to do that. Now we're going to be moving into the section of the workshop today that's going to be, we've got a couple of real experts in the design build field, both from a contractor perspective and from a designer perspective. And we've got Jim and Dave are going to help us out with some of the questions that I kind of posed earlier about what this workshop is all about. How do you get on teams? What's the risks involved? What are the opportunities? So I'm going to turn it over now to Dave and Jim, and they can start talking a little bit about this first question, which really talks a little bit about, this is more of a question about the individuals giving a little bit of their experience. So you kind of know where they're coming from. So Dave and Jim, can you talk a little bit about where you've been with DesignBuild?
Sure. Thanks, Don. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to people about DesignBuild and the process, and glad to see that Wisconsin is moving forward with that process. I guess, as with any new process and over the life of my career and involvement with DesignBuild, the best way to kind of summarize experiences is that it's can be varied. There's good and there's bad. However, I will say this, being both as a prime contractor and in some cases, companies I've worked with and for have been in subcontractor roles. Overall, it's been a positive experience. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the design build process really breaks down an adversarial relationship that dates back millennium. This is about teaming. It's about working together for a collective goal and getting everybody on the same page. Now, while that might sound, very holistic and kind of kumbaya-ish, it really does align the owner, the engineer, and the contractor with the same goals, much more so than your traditional design bid build project. Now, having said that, everyone still has their same internal and sort of company focused goals that they need to achieve. But in order to be successful, some of those have to be put by the wayside and for lack of a better term, aspire to the goals of the greater good. The more successful projects are those in which the team members have decided and have accepted that concept that we have project goals and everyone needs to work toward that. Now, that being said, there are the cases, and early on, there are always bumps in the road. As these teams formed, and I'm talking about not just the design, engineer, and subcontractor team, but the owner is a part of that team as well. And it needs to be acknowledged that in order for the project to be successful, the owner, along with the design build team, need to be on the same page. As they move forward, every new team kind of goes through 4 stages, and that is the forming, storming, norming, and then finally performing. So as everyone is getting together and forming their teams, they're kind of figuring out where they are, what their role is, and how to be a contributor to that team. Ultimately, as people get comfortable, you go through a storming stage where everyone's kind of protecting their turf a little bit and trying to assert themselves. But that kind of flows by the wayside, and the teams move into a norming phase where everyone now understands their roles, there's an acceptance of it, and that's when the performing part of it really begins and the projects really become successful. I think that if on a macro type level, if people understand the importance of accepting their role, understanding where they can contribute, and the fact that the goals of the project, outweigh kind of a nerdy approach, but the goals of the many outweigh the goals of the few. It's going to be an overall successful experience. Jim?
Thanks, Dave. I'll start off by letting everybody know that Dave and I have known each other for almost 14 years. Okay. And a lot of it has been involved in things like design build project pursuits. So my company asked me just about 15 years ago to head up their design build program. And the reason was we had done 4 or 5 design build projects and they were successful. We wanted to do more, but we didn't really understand. We didn't understand the complexity and the differences that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And in many cases, we had contractors reaching out to us about teaming, and we didn't even know if they were the right contractor to do the job. They didn't even know if we were the right engineer or architect for it. But it's kind of like going through that early stage that David just mentioned. It's like you have to get to know each other and understand. And actually, it's okay to say no, because no may be the right answer, because it may not be the right project and we may not be the right designer. So what's the difference? The experience has been actually great. After I got a chance to learn a lot more about it and get involved in an organization like DBIA, which allowed me the opportunity to interact a lot more with general contractors and understand the commonalities between the way they approach work and how we approach work. Yes, they're the contractor, so they're approaching it from an implementation side, and we're the designer, so we implement it, look to approach it from the technical side. But when those two things come together, when you have one of the strongest technical teams and you have one of the strongest contractors, and you put that together, it is so powerful compared to the low bid, design bid mentality and our approach to work. Almost to the point where it's like you get to a point after doing this a number of years, you say, why would you want to go design bid build on a project? So the experience has been very positive, and there's been ups and downs, right? You're not going to win every project, and you feel very bad, okay, when you lose. You want to know why. You want to know what you could have done different. But the primary difference is the level of effort involved. There is a great deal of effort required to win a design build project. And the performance of what we do is judged right from the time that we start and accept the role that we're going to take on that project. There's an enormous amount of work that has to be done at risk. Okay, and when I say at risk, I mean without being paid. So what we want to do is we want to support the team, and we want to do it the right way. Don't just spend money or spend time or resources which are valuable to all of our organizations in so many different respects, right? But we want to spend it properly, so we are definitely adding value to the team. Okay, so one of the areas that I want to talk to you about is the pre-award phase. Pre-award phase is the phase that starts when David and I talk and you say, you want to go after this design build project? Are you looking at it? There's different phases within the pre-award. There's the marketing phase, where we look at it and we say, first of all, can we market ourselves? Is this the right team? The answer might be that we have gaps, and maybe RS&H can do a good part of the job, but we're not the right lead. Maybe we're just not aligned with that because we didn't do our homework up front. But that starts almost 12 months ahead of the project advertisement. Now, sometimes projects crop up in a shorter version, right? The DOT doesn't necessarily have to, doesn't know that this project is going design build, and all of a sudden money comes available and things shift. That happens, but generally we like to plan ahead. In David's organization, my organization, and most of the teams feel the same way, because we need time to do all the things we have to do. After we market, okay, then we look at it and we say, okay, should we go down this road and be a team? We want to start doing it together. And we want to let everybody understand that we need to know what our strengths are. We need to know as much as we can about the project. The way we help David or whoever our general contractor is going to be win the job is we have to put together an efficient design that reduces the amount of exposure to risks. Their risks equate to our risks, but our risks are a little different as well. We'll get into that in the next set of questions, okay? But after we get the agreement together with both of us, then we start thinking about where our gaps are on the team. What do we need in addition to this? What information is available that we haven't got? We might turn around and we might say, you know, it would be really good if we had somebody that was involved with the earlier phase, who did the NEPA documents, or is there any geotechnical information available? Or who is the best firm to do this particular assignment, either because you have a key individual or you have knowledge and done something very similar. Under those veins, we put our heads together and say, okay, let's lock down those as early as we can. There's a general perception, okay, by small firms that the right way to market is to try to be on multiple teams. You can do that on design bid build. But when it comes to design build, exclusivity is somewhat vital. Now, it is possible, and we've had this done on other times when we've said we've allowed a team to be on maybe a second team, and there's enough resources that the same people are not going to be involved with the pursuit for both teams, and you can provide us with an equal professional that would be on the other team, and we can firewall between those two. But I'm going to tell you that that isn't done very often. It has to be justified, and if it can be justified, we'll do it. But at the same token, we can't necessarily share as much as we would, and we're going to talk about collaboration in this. Collaboration is a key component of design build. Once we get to the point where we've got those primary pieces there, then we're going to be in the point where we look to fill out the rest of the team. And that's when we're getting ready to start drafting our SOQ. That's generally done months ahead of time, even before the ad goes in. So when we go to the next question.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what areas that the design build team typically subs out, from a contractor standpoint, from a designer standpoint.
Sure. From a contractor standpoint, that's really, how do I say this? It's project specific and company specific. Some companies, for example, like myself, have the ability to, on your traditional bridge replacement or roadway type of project, have the ability to self-perform anywhere from 60 to 70% of the project. Now, while we like doing that because it affords us the ability to control quality, safety, schedule a little bit more intensely, we also understand that we're somewhat resource constrained. And with the work that we chase and the work that we procure, there may not be the opportunity for us to do all that self-performing work. That being said, there is always an opportunity, and in my company, I can say this, we don't have any problem in subcontracting out portions of the work we have the ability to self-perform. It all factors in with again, the resources, what makes sense from a schedule standpoint, the type of the work, geographic location. But as you can see on the slides here, some of the graphics, there's always an opportunity for the areas that we don't self-perform. And those, we're looking for experts in that market, or not really market, but in that speciality. For example, if there was a deep foundation that involved drilled shafts, or if there is something with electrical, signalization, things that we don't do, we want, if possible, to have someone on our team, if it will impact the ability to win the job, to be able to be with us early enough in the project that they can affect the outcome of our proposal. So some of the other things you'll see there, bridge work, some of the projects we chase, which corporately sometimes are determined to be mega projects, we will add additional companies that will do the bridge work, even though we can self-perform it, to help with schedule, help with resources, that type of thing. I think it's important that as the smaller firms and any subcontracted firm is out there marketing themselves to some of the prime contractors, they show their value, they show their capabilities, they show their resources, they show how they can bring value to that team. Now, Jim talked a little bit about exclusivity. Some of the markets in which I work, smaller firms and DBEs, specifically if they're in that category, are often precluded from having exclusive relationships. So you also need to know and understand a little bit about the legislation, the statutes, the procurement rules and regulations, so that you don't put yourself in an awkward position. But in those cases, we often work and understand that the teams they can't be exclusive, so they're going to be out in multiple teams, and we can set up firewalls and protections so that any confidentiality and confidential items that our team has doesn't find its way to other teams. Other than that, I think that the importance of the meeting back and forth, between your prime contractor, point of contact, your subcontract, and understanding what makes sense and how that team will move forward, and understanding the scopes and available work types that will be subcontract are key. And as Jim mentioned, do it often, do it early. The earlier you are with the prime contractor and their understanding, the better overall product will be produced at the proposal stage.
You know, David said a lot of things that make a lot of sense. What I want to emphasize with this group is that what's important to the contractor to sub and what's important for the engineering design lead to sub might be a little different, right? So if I want to find a really good design build contractor partner, the more work that they can do themselves, even if they elect not to do it themselves because of logistics or resources, the stronger that contractor is. On the designer side, I don't think the designer needs to do everything, but again, the more that they have experience doing, they're going to be more efficient managing. So when I look at these icons with the various different types of disciplines, these are all areas that we've subbed contracted work out on project, depending on its size, depending on logistics, and depending upon the other firms that might be available to help us. But we probably wouldn't do it on every job, right? Not every single one on every job. We're going to be selective. We're going to match. We're going to be looking for those early discussions with the client and someone telling me, well, it's going to be a really comprehensive project, but utility relocation is going to be imperative. If we don't figure out how to take care of the railroad relocation, if we don't have the opportunity to figure out how to get rid of this extremely sensitive high voltage line, and we got to worry about this overhead, if those things aren't dealt with properly, project schedule can be drastically impacted, but the cost will be impacted as well. So we might look at that and we might say, although we could do that, maybe there's a better firm. Maybe there's a specialty firm. In many cases, those aren't necessarily big firms. Sometimes they might be, but actually those firms might be leading a design build team themselves. They might be competing against us. So we have to look for somebody that's small and specialized. I can't tell you how many small specialty firms we have worked with on alternative project delivery that have been so key that we bring them along with us on other projects later on in that same region, because done a good job, done it well. Now you've learned, you understand the design build process. Would make a lot of sense to us. That's also makes a lot of sense when David comes to me and says, I don't care if they're exclusive or not, let's still get this particular firm on board. They did such a great job. And we'll agree because we say the same thing. So in the decision-making process, what will happen is the designer will take the lead on putting together their team, but it's going to be subject to approval by the design builder. Why? Because we're part of their team. And if they've had a bad experience, that may reflect. At the same token, if they had a good experience, that will reflect as well. But we do these things together as a team. It's very different. It's almost to the point where when you have a really good contracting partner and there's a relationship intact, the design teams want to work for them on the next one. They almost lobby to make sure that, hey, can we call up Archer Weston again and see if they're available? Because if they are, I'd love to get on their team, even if it's as a sub capacity versus lead, because of that camaraderie and the collaboration that occurs successfusly. And you can't even discount some of the things like public involvement and some of these other environmental permits. Geotechnical are all extremely important components, but it is important for you to understand your value and how to bring that value. We'll try to answer that question for you as well.
Say, Jim, there's one question that came from Cheryl. Thank you for submitting it, Cheryl. As a DBE consultant, how do we get in front of the lead consultants to assist them on the projects or be part of the process? I know you've touched on that, but what's the best way to do that?
Actually, there's many ways of doing it. Most important thing is understanding the projects that are going to be coming out in your region, right? So if Wisconsin DOT has some type of a program and they continually look at this, and we know that it's early, right? This is a pilot program. They've already shared with you what's in the works right now, but it's going to be successful. And as it's successful, the next thing is, when are the next round of projects coming out? Know what those projects are. Know where you might fit within those. Know the consultants that are more than likely going to take on a leadership role on these, and talk to them early. Find areas where you might have value that might be different than everybody else. We've already looked at the stakeholders and developed a list. We know who they are. We'll work with them before. We've already looked at the original geotechnical report and found some areas that Wisconsin DOT feels need to be looked at some more. Those type of value added discussions and that technical information, which you hold close to your vest until you get someone telling you that you're on the team. And then when you're formally on the team and that agreement's in place, now you might feel valuable in being able to share some of it, and it will put you in what I call a leadership position in your discipline. There's two different ways you can be part of a design build team. As David mentioned, we need production in many cases, so we want a good team that can actually help produce after we win the job. But at the same token, during the pre-award, we want to be able to bring that technical leadership into the war room strategy. What we do is, after we get together the team and we know who they are, we want to put them in a room and we want to think in terms of some of the things we can do to differentiate our team and make ourselves that much more viable. Okay, with respect to that. Those are the leadership positions. Even if you don't have to be involved in, the amount of meetings that the lead designer is, you come in for an hour session and talk about your technical area, it can really put you in a different light with respect to the team. So it's visibility, showing a way of added value. And that added value can be just as much of, we do a lot of Wisconsin DOT work and they think very highly of us in the field that we're looking to market. And then understanding the difference between design bid build and design build. Now, let me tell you how I got that through involvement with DBIA. And you can go to conferences, you go to some of the regional meetings and conferences they have. Some of them are virtual. So you can attend this year's conference, for example, virtually. You don't necessarily have to travel out there and look to do all those things. But there's a lot of educational value that the organization brings forward. And it really made me understand why we were doing some things wrong 15 years ago. And how, okay, you really need to understand that the client in the room is not Wisconsin DOT to you. They're the end user, and they're the one we want to please. It's David. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Deb.
Okay, so I think we're gonna move on here, guys. We're moving right through our time here, and it's all good stuff. But there's a couple questions that were out there. I think I'm going to save those to the end because they're more probably directed towards or Ben, our original presenter. So let's move on to. We talked a little bit about how to get on a design build team and what kind of people they're looking for. But let's talk a little bit about what does a prime contractor and a lead consultant look for in a design or a partner to be on the design build team. And I think we've talked a little bit about this, but maybe we touch a little more on what you're looking for.
Absolutely. I think if you look here on the current slide that we're showing, we're always looking for firms that we know are going to be provide quality work, responsive service, adhere to a budget, especially if you've got a low bid design build project. Anybody with specialty skills, capacity, innovation. These are all kind of the, I think, Jim, we mentioned it in some previous discussions, that these are kind of the minimum requirements we're looking for. And I want to say that over the last 15 years, what I've seen in the industry has been an evolution from, I want somebody that I know has a great relationship with the owner and does good design, to 5 years ago, where I want somebody that has the experience and maybe done something the same, but knows how to work in a collaborative and a team environment, because that is what is a little bit different. Actually, what is a lot different than the traditional design bid build is the design build is that environment you're working with, sharing ideas and kind of releasing some of that pride of authorship and pride of design and being willing to accept. So you might have the greatest designer ever in Wisconsin that can put foundations in, understand what's going on. But if you can't work well in a team environment, then it detracts from the team. I think that that's some of the skill sets that we're looking for. It's more of the soft skills from a contracting perspective and design, and we really don't know what happens behind the curtain when it comes to design reviews and approvals and that sort of thing. And that's what we rely a lot on our engineering partners to be able to navigate. So as we're looking and interviewing engineering partners, we're trying to understand from their perspective, how efficient are they at getting a design approved? Because this is a compressed schedule, there's going to be things we need to get done. So we need to make sure that they understand the path, the process, and the procedures by which we are ultimately going to get a set of documents that's ready for and approved for construction. That's kind of the contractor's perspective.
Just piggybacking on what David said, the first 5 of these items, absolutely essential, right? And we do it every day, hopefully in our work, and we get rewarded by new selections by Wisconsin DOT or whoever our clients are. That's quality, being responsive, budget adherence, having a specialty skill and the capacity to do the work. What I think is unique to the design build is the last 3. It's the innovative, collaborative, and the value added part. And the reason for that is that even though everybody looks to those 3 things as well, the design build process opens the door for them to be extremely broadly impactful. How valuable and rewarding is it to come out of it saying that you came up with the idea that changed the concept that we put into an ATC that David sold at a meeting, and Wisconsin said, wow, absolutely, I love that. And nobody else thought of that. And I know that some of these things sound like they're mountainous and huge cliffs to have to navigate, and it's really not. Some of it is basic engineering and logic and putting it together that nobody else thought about. And I have so many examples that I can't necessarily share them all in this time frame. But I think if you go to any DBIA conference and you look at some of the award-winning projects that are highlighted, you'll see those stories. And there's many, many, many more. Because even though we select one project, the other 3 or 4 or 5 that didn't quite make it equally were astounding and amazing stories. So I think there's a lot to be done there, and there's a lot of capability in this room to add to these design build teams.
Thanks, Jim. We're gonna move on to we're cutting a little short on our time, but we're gonna move on to some of the risks. I think it's important we cover that. Dave, you want to talk a little about what difference there is in this type of a contract versus a normal one as far as risk goes?
Absolutely. I think that if you go to the next slide, we've got a graphic that kind of accurately represents what amount of risk the contractor, and I'm going to say the design builder, because that's the entity that executes the contract with the owner, assumes. Not necessarily all these risks are passed down to the subcontracting level, which is a good thing and should put people a lot at ease. But for some of the people that are going to be performing in that lead role, things to understand about design build, that are risks that may be obvious that you're assuming, but hadn't really considered, are for sure schedule, more so than your traditional project, because there are aspects of the schedule that you can't directly influence because someone else owns that part of the critical path. In other words, the design, permitting, utility relocation. Working across the country, the utility owners always work at their own pace and their own schedule, and the best thing you can do is just help them manage and clear the space so they can get their work done. But yet, inevitably, there are challenges with utility relocation. Permit timing, you think you might know in the past, engineers have gotten permits in X amount of days, but now we're asking for an expedited review, or we're not providing necessarily all the details that the permitting agencies used to see in, because it's a design build process and we want to get ultimately to the point where we can break ground. subsequent to the schedule. There's quantity risk. You don't have 100% design. You're far from that thing called scope creep. No matter how many projects you've built, design, bid, build, there's always things that, and a mindset of I'm just going to count what's on the drawings. You can't do that. You need to fill in a lot of gaps. So there's a quantity issue, or not issue, but a quantity risk that you're assuming onto yourself. Price escalations. Contractors don't often factor this because as soon as they, on a traditional project, get a contract, they can release subcontracts and purchase orders and begin the procurement process for the materials. Well, with a design build project, you've got a long lead time before you're going to get and need those materials, much less knowing how many of those materials you're going to need. So whose crystal ball is really clear enough to understand 9, 12, 14 months out what the cost of steel is going to be? Or if there's going to be, I don't know, an invasion in Europe and all of a sudden your gas prices have gone up 50 cents in the last 3 days. So those types of things often fall onto the contractor, and they have to kind of work around and manage those opportunities.
So if you haven't figured it out, David carries the lion's share of the weight here when it comes to risk, right? And contractually, you try to make sure that we all have our certain responsibilities within that without assuming each other's risks. So we have the design risk, and at the same token, you have a specialty engineering risk. But just as the case with David, if you don't do something or there's a lack of performance or an error or omission, it's going to end up falling up under me as the lead designer. So what we need to do is we need to collaborate as much as possible. We need to make everybody feel comfortable that they know what their roles are and they're really focused on the game, right? On what needs to be done. If we can develop the most efficient design and make the contractor comfortable submitting their bid based on this 20% set of plans, and we can do it in a manner that identifies any of the potential risks, reduces the potential for high-level contingencies in different items, then we can make the contractor successful, and we are successful in the same manner, but we need to do it while we're also watching closely what the potential risks are and building that into the technical proposal and schedule.
Okay, I think we're getting towards the end here. Great, just great sharing. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to get back to some of the questions that everybody had here. Looks like Branko had one. How are the boundaries defined between the consultant and the contractor in design build? So how are the boundaries defined between the contractor and consultant in design build? And how does the collaborative effort work and how it benefits the owner over the traditional process? So the collaboration, or the boundaries and the collaboration.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, probably one that could have its own session. I will say that in the 30-second kind of response to that, we've got a very detailed professional services agreement that my company has developed over the years. I will put a plug in for the DBIA contracts. If your company's not that quite sophisticated, that you can go to the website. There are great example contracts there, professional services agreement from the contractor to the designer, and they lay out a lot of the framework about who's accepting the risks, and they're fair, well balanced and good contracts. And to be honest, our professional services agreement is loosely based upon the framework that the DBAA contract structure has put forth.
Thanks, Dave. One for Ben. Ben, how do you expect the design build process to grow over the next 5 to 10 years? How do you see the transition from design bid build process in Wisconsin? 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so for 5 years almost, we'll still be in this pilot program. So we have, I think it goes until 2026, I think, is when we need to have our first 6 projects done. And we are, up until then, we're only allowed to do those 6 projects as design build. So in the next couple of years, we have 3 projects. Beyond that, it depends a little bit on how these first 6 go. I don't, foresee our whole program switching to design build in 10 years. I would, optimistically, I would say we'd have a few more projects than the 6 we have now in a year. Maybe we'd have 5 a year, something like that. But it's hard to say because it really does depend on how things go in the next couple of years. But it won't be I can definitely say with pretty good confidence it won't be the majority of our program anytime soon.
Thanks, Ben. Bruce Spahn had one. During pre-award stipend phase, is the DBE design consultant expected to participate during the pre-award stipend phase? Is the DBE design consultant expect to participate?
Want me to take that, Dave? So
Sure.
try
Every
to
project's
do-
different.
What we try to do is we try to be equitable based on the percentage of the effort involved. Okay. What does that mean? Well, when you see the effort involved, it's quite substantial. It is not unusual for us to spend $100,000 in direct labor, okay, on a design build pursuit. And we have detailed information on it, and we track pursuits throughout the company, and we monitor all this and develop databases. So even without looking at a set of plans, we can go into our database and come up with a pretty good estimate of what it's going to take. So when we look at it and we say, okay, we're looking to maybe spread this around, we might turn to another subconsultant, say, do you have the capacity to do this much work? Because we need help with the structural engineering on the upfront, and we might apportion part of that. And if that's the case, we'll do that. If it flows down to more than 3 or 4 firms, it's very unusual. So on a smaller firm, we're probably not going to look for a lot of production type work where we're actually designing bridges, but we might be looking at things like getting clarification with respect to ranges of design, reviewing products such as prior studies and the likes, and participating in meetings.
Thanks, Jim. Just a couple things before we shut off today. There is a evaluation. It's in the chat room. It's in the chat. You can click on a link and do an evaluation. But as we close, I want to thank the panel members, Ben Thompson from WisDOT, and thank you for presenting the program and what to expect as far as WisDOT in the future. And I'd like to thank the DBA, Design Build Institute of America, and the people, Dave and Jim, who they offered up to help us understand some of the perspectives of design build and how that's different than our traditional design bid build process. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, audience, for being good participants, and thanks for all the good questions. And have a good rest of your conference. But go ahead and fill out the evaluation if you have time. It's in the chat room. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.